The challenge is
Eric
will
Holder.
he respect?
They're talking about criminal contempt, meaning the House of Representatives would have to persuade the Justice Department to prosecute the head of the Justice Department.
It's 0 to 100, the % chance in your mind that this man will be prosecuted.
0.
Mr. Newell, you were the special agent in charge who oversaw this operation, and agents you worked and who worked it for the last year. What is your reaction to this speculation? When you were engaged in Operation Fast and Furious, I ask you for the record, were you deliberately attempting, or do you know others that were deliberately attempting to send guns to Mexico to justify additional firearms regulations?
In response to your question, sir, I don't recall saying that that's...
And I didn't say you did. I'm just saying, do you believe that?
No, I don't believe
based upon everything you know?
that. No, I don't.
Okay, Mr. McMahon.
Absolutely not, sir.
While it's fair to question the judgment using the case, and I certainly question it, and again, we are trying to get to the bottom of all of this, suggesting a conspiracy to harm others goes beyond the pale, and I think that, I just,
Clearly, some folks had what happened in Fast and Furious, they had that in mind as something to use to support a policy that people in this administration are advocating for. Basically, using a situation created by the government to support a policy argument folks in the government want to make. And your response was that was somehow unrelated, or it was so far back in time that maybe it was unconnected. What exactly was your response on that,
well,
Mr. Lundgren?
The statement, the notion that somehow this operation was used to justify the request for that regulation is simply not accurate. It did not happen that way. The operation was conducted separate and apart from any desire to have this long gun regulation. That's simply not there. Now, so that just didn't happen.
Chairman, and I'd first like to ask unanimous consent that the following document be placed in the record. December 7th, article by Cheryl Atkinson entitled Documents ATF Used Fast and Furious to Make Case for Gun Regulations.
Without objection, they'll be made a part of it.
ATF created the problem so they could be the solution to it. That is a quote out of CBS News. The Fast and Furious program that saw the ATF deliver guns into the hands of Mexican drug gangs was admittedly exploited to demonize the Second Amendment and push new gun control regulations. And it goes on, ATF created the problem so they could be the solution to it. And CBS obtained the documents showing the ATF at the highest level setting up the Second Amendment to blame it on gun shops in America.
I've got to deal with people in my district who are law-abiding citizens who believe in the Second Amendment, who say to me, look, the feds are overreaching all over the place, and here you got a situation where they screwed up. They're the ones responsible for hundreds, if not thousands, of weapons going to Mexico. People are dying, including some of our law enforcement agents, and yet they're using that as an excuse to extend their reach in the law. Now, either this memo, are you aware of this memo, July 14th, 2010, from Mark Chait to Bill Newell?
No, I'm not aware of it.
Would you think that'd be appropriate?
Well, I think what you're taking a memo and taking it, I think, out of context.
Sir, I'll give you a chance to answer, but I'll tell you why I don't think I'm taking out of context. This is in direct reference to the guns that were all involved in Fast and Furious, and then you have someone under your direction, not saying you direct them to do it, but someone who's under your authority, saying, let's use this stuff. Maybe it's going to help us. I don't know if it's going to help us at a hearing, but it's going to help us try and get our new policy through. And then I'm trying to respond to law-abiding citizens who believe in the Second Amendment, who say, you got the federal government who screws up sending thousands of weapons south. They're using that as an excuse why they should put more restrictions on us. Some people might reasonably come to the conclusion that's sort of self-dealing. The department creates a situation in which weapons go south across the border in the hundreds, if not the thousands, and then uses evidence of the fact that that occurred to support their effort to try and extend the reach of the law.
The federal government is doing what it does best,
creating gun control regulations to solve a problem it created.
I now would go to the questions of emails. This is the documents you refer to. Most of these documents, 5,000 or so, are in fact emails.
The emails showed ATF members congratulating each other for blaming border violence on guns bought from U.S. dealers, despite the fact that the feds were the ones delivering them straight to the Mexican criminals under the program. Fast and Furious.
He shipped tens of thousands of firearms directly into Mexico, and when it started to break, they spun it like they were just tracking some guns out of some gun shops. I mean, how much criminality will you accept? How much? Is there a line in the sand? Is there any moral connection to reality? And those of you out there that aren't directly involved in all of this, you know this is going on now. This is all public. There's no excuses. There's no you didn't know, you didn't understand it. And here it is. The memo's now released to blame the Second Amendment. To blame the Second Amendment. To blame our right so a criminal government can try to take my rights. Listen, you idiots in government. The war with the British started when they came to get the guns. That was the last straw, folks.
But I think the thing that would really concern the American people is why this was all done. On the one hand, if it was just something that was a sincere effort that went wrong or was just gross incompetence, so that's one thing. But Mr. Issa mentioned some internal emails that I think were pretty significant, because if the American people learned that the motivations for all of this was somehow to make a case to deprive them of their Second Amendment rights, or to make a case to further the department's ability to further regulate gun rights within the United States, that would make them very angry, General. And so let me just read a couple of the emails again. I know that Mr. Issa has already done this, but I just want to be clear on this so that you understand why some of us are so concerned. On July 14, 2010, the ATF headquarters received an update on Fast and Furious, and the Assistant Director, Mark Chait, emailed Bill Newell, the head of the ATF's Phoenix office. Quote, Bill, can you see if these guns were all purchased from the same licensed gun dealer and at one time? We're looking at anecdotal cases to support a demand letter on long gun multiple sales. Thanks. In other words, they were trying to use this tragedy to build a case for these demanders. Well done yesterday, Bill. In light of our request for demand letter 3, this case could be a strong supporting factor if we determine how many multiple sales of long guns occurred during the course of this case. And it appears that the ATF was trying to rely on walked guns orchestrated by the department to justify its new long gun reporting requirement known as Demand Letter 3. Well, the people would be very upset. Is that true? Now, you've already testified that you hadn't read these emails. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, that I haven't read?
You already told Mr. Issa that you hadn't actually read these emails.
Right. That's correct.
Well, the thing that is difficult for me, General, is that you then told him that it was out of context. And how would you have known that it was out of context if you hadn't read them? Do you read major letters from oversight chairmen like Mr. Issa and Mr. Grassley that come to your office? Do you personally read these letters?
I can certainly say that over the last few months, everything that Mr. Issa has sent, that Senator Grassley has sent, I have read.
Well, let me just say then to you, on July 12th, 2011, which was a letter that they both sent to you, the emails I just read to you were attached to the letter.
The nagging question about Fast and Furious has been why. Officials claimed at the outset they would follow the guns, climb the ladder, and topple a cartel. But agents were not allowed to do that. Well, new documents suggest some officials saw Fast and Furious as an opportunity to support gun control.
When you screw up, you ought to say you screw up. The people who are involved ought to say they screwed up. And then don't allow your screw up to be the basis for trying to extend your legislative agenda.
Think about the implications of what you're saying, is that the Justice Department came up with a flawed program in order to justify a regulation, And given all that comes from...
No, I'm talking about after the fact. After the fact. You screwed up. You ought to admit you screwed up, but you ought not to use your screw up as a basis for trying to extend your authority. That's my point. I'm not trying to talk about a conspiracy.
The ATF ships guns into Mexico and then blames the Second Amendment. Confirmed. Release documents. Congress has them. Public. Quote, CBS News, ATF created the problem so they could be the solution to it. Oh, I think I've heard that before. Hegelian dialectic. Problem, reaction, solution.
Very clearly, they made a crisis, and they're using this crisis to somehow take away or limit people's Second Amendment rights.